Welcome to JFK Facts Podcast, which features news, analysis, and discussion of issues relevant to the study of President Kennedy's assassination. My name is Alan Dale. Courtesy of the founder and editor of JFK Facts, Jefferson Morley, today's program offers a special opportunity and privilege. Our guest is a most uncommon scholar, an independent investigator of the truth with an unbiased instinct for what is important and what is not in the details of President Kennedy's assassination. He is regarded within the assassination research community as an esteemed authority on the internal systems and management authorities of the Cold War's competing intelligence agencies, and his examinations and understanding of the JFK records held at the National Archives and Records Administration in College Park, Maryland, may be unrivaled and unprecedented within our community. He is the 1998 recipient of JFK Lancer's New Frontier Award in appreciation for his contribution of new evidence in furthering the study of the assassination of President Kennedy, and he is the focal point of the recently published book, The Devil is in the Details, Alan Dale with Malcolm Blunt on the assassination of President Kennedy. It's my pleasure to introduce the inimitable Malcolm Blunt to JFK Facts. Thank you for being with us.
Good to be here, Alan.
At this point, good to be anywhere, right?
Yeah, correct.
That's right, because it's been an awfully strange couple of years, that's for sure. One of the things that is in evidence within the pages of the book The Devil is in the Details, which consists primarily of 10 transcribed conversations which we shared during a period between, I think, 2014 and 2018 or 2019. We continued to add little bits and pieces. One of the things that's in evidence is that a real effort to understand the interior, the architecture, the bureaucracy of the CIA during the Cold War is not something that should be undertaken by the faint of heart, because there are things that make sense and there are things that are counterintuitive, and more than anything else, there is compartmentalization. There are so many different divisions, so many different staffs, and a culture of separation where literally a person can be working within the same division but at a different desk and have no idea what the people around them are working on. Will you give me a little bit of a sense of the process by which you first recognized how complex and unique the interior of the agency was during the period which is the focus of our attention?
I think it was, it happened over quite a long period for me. I mean, there were unique moments. I think one of the moments, and we've referred to it before, was actually sitting down with Pete Bagley and talking about the structure of the Soviet Russia division, and then he actually told me we were talking about SR9, and he was in Russia counterintelligences, and he said to me that they just didn't, in counterintelligence, they just didn't know what was going on in SR9. It was so screened off, it was so compartmentalized that, and I think he added, nobody knew what they were doing. So, I mean, by nobody, one could even stretch that out to Angleton. So they were so screened off because, the Soviet internal operations was such a special thing within the agency, within the Soviet division.
And included the sort of construction, a necessary construct to accommodate an entire new category within the agency which pertained to Soviet defectors, such as, Pyotr Popov is the first big name, really, that comes to mind. We should clarify that Tenant Pete Bagley, was a career CIA officer very distinguished career CIA officer, extraordinary mind. He ultimately was on a trajectory where he became the chief of counterintelligence of the Soviet Russia division, which means that his immediate superior was James Angleton, who was chief of counterintelligence, and is the obvious figure that we're very interested in.
Well, I mean, I think his superior was in the Soviet Russia division. I mean, we're talking about the Soviet Russia division.
Yes.
And that was, at that time, when we're talking about when Pete Bagley was counterintelligence chief, the chief of the Soviet Russia division was Dave Murphy.
Dave Murphy, right. And was Lynn McCoy also in Soviet Russia?
Yeah, he was a reports and requirement officer within the Soviet Russia division, yeah.
Yeah.
So those are Soviet, when we talk about reports and requirements officers, these are the people that see the most sensitive material. They see it all.
Mm-hmm. And yet,
that again is a very compartmentalized part of CIA. So that's report requirements, yeah.
When we skip ahead to one of your notable experiences, which we've documented elsewhere, in conversation with your friend Pete Bagley at his apartment in Brussels, Belgium, in the early 2000s, one of the things that I've always been curious and have never been clear in my own thinking, you had chosen to bring documents to share with him, released documents, which came as a big surprise to him. He was either chagrined or disgusted or something, because he mutter after looking at one batch of materials, he kept putting his glasses on and taking them off and shaking his head, and he literally said under his breath, "And they call us a secret agency."
That was at a separate time.
Yeah.
That was at a separate time.
But with regard to the process of getting to presenting to Mr. Bagley the materials relevant to the subversion of the internal system by which materials pertaining to the Oswald defection sequence in early November of 1959. The defection event takes place on October 31st of 59, generates a great deal of material from the State Department and elsewhere, which instead of going through the normal trajectory is delivered by the Office of Mail Logistics to a component within the Office of Security, where it is sort of sequestered, which is not a normal trajectory. And so you decided to bring that material with you that defined exactly what it is to which I just referred, and you wanted to get Pete's educated eyes on this, and for him to tell you, to give you a sense of his reaction to this. My question is, how did you know that he actually had never seen any of this material?
Well, he was totally... I think that was always a constant. Whenever I used to go, I used to obviously take documents, lots of stuff. I was at the National Archives. I was doing lots of stuff. I had lots of Nosenko material, other material, and really, that's when he made that comment about and we're supposed to be a secret organization.
Oh, yeah.
Because his mindset was way back. His mindset was back then. So to see all this stuff, including cover sheets he signed off on, to him was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. And he was not too thrilled about it, actually.
No, not really. No. I mean, obviously very pleased to get some of the Nosenko material, which he hadn't seen. That's right.
The reason being that we should clarify two things very briefly. Yuri Nosenko is arguably the most consequential Soviet defector in place of the 1960s, because his bona fides literally it distressed the fabric of the interior of the agency like nothing that had ever penetrated. This was a figure who approached, he was a Soviet intelligence officer, he approached, of all people, Pete Bagley. In 1962, Pete Bagley became his case officer, and the simple version that we think we understand is that Mr. Nosenko claimed to CIA officer Tenant Pete Bagley that he had gotten into trouble with a girl and he needed some money. I think it was a very modest amount of money, even by 1962 standards, $250. And that for $250 he could provide some relevant intelligence and begin a very consequential relationship with the agency. He stays in the Soviet Union. He's married. He has kids. Pete Bagley is dealing with him on a periodic basis. After November 22nd, 1963, something important changes, and Nosenko finds his way to the United States, where he is then subjected to very harsh interrogations, restrictions, imprisonment, and arguably sort of torturous conditions, while the agency evaluates his legitimacy. And then what?
But not initially.
No, not initially.
When he first came over, it was the out on the town and vacation period.
Yeah.
So it was only after, was it 2 months or 3 months, and then he was put into a safe house in the Washington D.C. area. And
safe basement.
No, that was later.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was put into one, and then he moved to another one. He moved to a purpose-built, as we call it, a bank vault.
Yeah.
So
that's the period that I'm referring to. And maybe it would be helpful if we just described what was his message that he brought from Soviet intelligence to his American counterpart.
The message was basically that they had nothing to do with Oswald. They didn't touch him with a barge pole, and he was an embarrassment to them. And they just what they tried to do was just resettle him in the country and humor him, really. That he wasn't someone that they thought could, or the KGB thought could be of any use to them.
So basically, Yuri Nosenko's message to the United States, to the CIA, is, hey, we didn't have anything whatsoever to do with this alleged assassin of President Kennedy. And he found among his, counterparts a great number of people, certain people in particular, who very much liked to hear that message.
It's a good message, if you wanted to, close the investigation of the assassination of the president. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a very, very interesting area. I suspect that people with a casual or other interest in the JFK story have probably wondered why is there so much focus on people that they've never heard of, like Yuri Nosenko or Pyotr Popov or the Shadrin case. His real name was Nikolai. What was his last name? Started with an A?
Artemanov.
Yeah. And the reason is because there is a great deal about the interior of the CIA that is not one thing. It's a whole bunch of things. It's multifaceted. And some of these issues pertaining to these Soviet defectors, and in particular, Peter Popov's claim that the Soviet authorities had full technical details on the U-2, and Yuri Nosenko's claim that the Soviet Union had no interest beyond the minimal routine interest in Lee Oswald. You have to recognize the mirror image of what we've been told about the agency's attitude about Lee Oswald in a post-assassination world. We had only a routine interest in him and nothing of particular significance. In other words, you've got a balancing act, a mirrored choreography where the CIA and the KGB are, for the first time in history, so far as I'm aware, having a gentleman's agreement. Because what we know now that is unambiguous, that is clearly defined and provable within the documentary records, that I.J. Decanter stuff from, a trusted Soviet or Minsk KGB source, all of the stuff that you have focused so much of your life trying to identify and to understand and to place in appropriate context. What the reason we're focused on these Russian guys and their CIA benefactors or adversaries is because it appears to be a case that for the first time in history, the KGB and the CIA had a mutual interest in supporting each other. KGB says to CIA, we didn't have anything to do with Oswald. We weren't interested in him. He seemed kind of strange, and we had nothing really to do with him. At which point the CIA says, well, that's exactly how we feel. And then they shake hands. Is that
right? Yeah.
That's why it's important, because in each of those two cases, what we know now that we didn't know then is that they were lying.
Well, it's all summed up so well by Yuri Nosenko himself.
What did he say?
We did not speak to him. He was not normal.
Right. We didn't speak to him. He was not normal. Yeah. What a strange and improbable arrangement that emerged between the CIA and the KGB. The only problem was there was a guy inside the Counterintelligence Special Investigations Group, Chief of Counterintelligence James Angleton, who never bought for one moment that Yuri Nosenko could be authentic and that his message could be true. Instead, it initiated what I think you've placed in terms of a really devastating period of disruption, of fracturing, especially of the Soviet Russia division, where people who were career intelligence officers, their careers were destroyed because of Angleton's suspicion that there was indeed a mole and that he was going to do everything that he was capable of doing to expose the mole. But the irony here, of course, from our perspective in this moment is maybe he was looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic in a sense. We've talked about this maybe before, that one of the things Pete Bagley just blurted out one day was the fact that Howard Hunt set up a desk in the Soviet Russia division in 1962.
What on earth is he doing in the Soviet Russia division when he's a Spanish-speaking, Western Hemisphere guy? What on earth is Howard Hunt doing there?
Well, we've talked about going to different files, different places, and finding different things which connect way over on the other side where you've been in a totally different place. But in Howard Hunt's HSCA subject file, FBI subject file, there are a few pages, and they're really interesting pages because they talk about CIA personnel files and security files being dished out to the FBI by no less than Bruce Soley.
Oh, really? How helpful.
Very, very good. And but the follow-on document to that one page, and they're specifying a person in these documents. They specify a person, a Soviet division officer called Peter Carlo, and the following pages have Hunt. He's obviously under observation, or Carlo's under observation.
Yeah.
And at parties being given by the Carlos, Howard Hunt and wife appear. Now, I'm not saying that's a coincidence. You've got Carlo under investigation, and Hunt shows up in the Soviet division, and then he's at parties where one of the main suspect moles is actually entertaining people. That seems more like a trail.
A trail of an investigation, an internal plant, an internal investigation, yeah.
But of course, Angleton denies up and down he knew Hunt, ever knew Hunt.
Yeah, well, he denied lots of things, but
so when the FBI did a background check for the White House, for his employment at the White House, they talked to a guy called George Murphy, who was a former CIA guy, and he worked for the Atomic Energy Commission when they interviewed him. And they asked him about Howard Hunt, and George Murphy said, when he was at the CIA, he worked for quote unquote John Angleton. He doesn't call him James Angleton; he calls him John Angleton. I thought, apart from the slip with the Christian name,
yeah,
there you go. I mean, it's interesting that Hunt set up a desk in the Soviet division in '62.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You know, Dr. Newman has been very focused right now for Volume 4 in his continuing work on President Kennedy's life, his period of public service, and his death, the meaning and consequences of his death. He's been focused on the third term of Franklin Roosevelt, World War II era explosion of intelligence activities, OSS, and intelligence component called X2, which Angleton seemed to head. This is during the period where Alan Dulles is OSS chief of station in Bern, Switzerland, when he's cavorting, with all kinds of intelligence elements from the Vatican and from the SS and all kinds of interesting people and places and things. And I think that one of the things that is not well understood, which I think you understand, British intelligence played a very influential role in the origins of the CIA. The relationship between the OSS and British intelligence was intimate. And ultimately, not only Kim Philby, as a figure of consequence, as a Soviet agent, who was a senior British intelligence officer with a close personal relationship to James Angleton, but also a man named George Blake. I never hear anybody talk about George Blake and the importance of who he was, where he was, what he did, and how that might be very important in terms of analyzing Oswald's defection and the Soviet reaction. Could we talk a little bit about George Blake?
George Blake obviously was a high-ranking. He wasn't a high-ranking. Well, he was a senior MI6 staffer, senior MI6 agent. During the 50s, and he gave the KGB the crown jewels with the details on the Berling Tunnel, and also he gave up the British and American Tourist Agent program.
The Tourist Agent program. What is that?
That was in CIA terms, SR-10 was where they used legal travelers to go to the Soviet Union
and spy and report and to take pictures of cranes, construction cranes, and all kinds of every kind of thing, including an awful lot that we would almost overlook as being innocuous. But the agency was interested in absorbing absolutely as much detail as possible about every aspect of Soviet life. And
there was a chronic of human intelligence, so they had to get it where they could.
So in 1959, someone who is a senior British intelligence officer is working for the KGB, and he reports to his KGB handlers all of the information that would be relevant to assessing figures like Robert Webster and Lee Oswald, who show up within 2 weeks of each other and claim that they wish to live in the Soviet Union, right?
Right. And
In other words, maybe the Soviet authorities had been recently informed about something that's a big deal, the result of which is they would be on guard against penetrations of the kind that might be in evidence when a young former Marine with special technical training in radar stuff from Atsugi shows up and offers to share whatever he can share.
Absolutely. I mean, the antennas would be up as soon as, Petrelli, Webster, and Oswald appeared. For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's quite something, isn't it? Well, thank you for allowing us to do this. Always grateful to you. We'd like to thank all of you for listening. We invite you to join us at jfkfacts.org, where you will find updates on JFK-related news with the goal of dispelling confusion and establishing an accurate historical record of the JFK story. Thank you for being with us.